10th house in a natal chart is the place of ambition, aspiration, career, status, and reputation. It answers one of the big questions of who do you want to be when you grow up. 4th house, which is the house opposite the 10th, is your private life, right? And the 10th house is your public life. So it's not just career, it's also what are you known for in the world and what are you working towards. In this video, I will describe the 10th house and describe the planets in the 10th house. If you do not have any planets here, listen for the planet that rules the house. For example, Mars for Aries. Let's dive in. My name is Anastasia. I'm a traditional Western astrologer specializing in natal, relationship, and predictive readings. If you like my channel, don't forget to leave a like or a comment, subscribe, and press the notification bell so you don't miss any of my videos. You also have an option of saying thank you if you'd like to buy me a coffee. If you'd like to work with me, there are links down below. I also create magical candles and oils that can help you get through the difficult transits like Mercury retrograde, Venus retrograde, the eclipse season when the emotions are running wild and high. Highly recommend you check out anastasiadoesastrology.com, the shop section, and pick up a magical tool for yourself. So I have done a general video on the houses. Check that out first to see what houses are all about. And let me know in the comments below if you have any planets in the 10th house. And if you don't, let me know what the ruler is, so whether you feel like it resonates or not. Because no house is ever empty, right? There's always a landlord, and the landlord is the planet that is in charge. For example, I'm a Libra rising, my 10th house is Cancer, and the Cancer is the sign ruled by the moon, so I would look at the moon if I didn't have any planets in the 10th house. So 10th house is important. It's an angular house, meaning that it correlates to the angles in the chart. We have ascendant, descendant, midheaven, and IC, which represent big kind of turning points, right? Ascendant, descendant is the horizon line. So the sun rises in the east with the ascendant. It sets in the west with the descendant. The midheaven, which is very much associated with career as well, and is usually placed in the 10th house, not always. There are other situations where midheaven can be in your 9th house, or it's in your 11th, 8th, or 12th, but the midheaven represents the highest point in the skies, right? It's the point where the sun climbs after rising in the east and starts setting after this point. So midheaven connected to career in the 10th house is the place of person's culmination, as is for the sun, similarly for the individual. And then opposite the midheaven we have IC, and that is the bottom highest point, right? The highest point in the other hemisphere. So it's more your private life. It's kind of your culmination in your private life. So angular houses have major importance. 1st house represents who you are. 4th house represents your family. 7th house represents your one-on-one relationships, your marriage, your partner. And 10th house represents what do you do for a living, right? It's at the top of the chart, like I said at the in the introduction to this video. Represents your public life versus 4th house represents your private life. For some people, it's your profession. It will tend to be something you're striving towards, right? 6th house is the grind and the work that is not a career, because 10th house is more of a career. It's like ambition gets realized in the 10th house. So if you are in college, right, and you work as a barista, and that's not the final goal of your life, then the barista job will be in your 6th house versus your career. Like, for example, you have let's say you have Capricorn in your 6th house, and you do work that's like maybe managerial. You work at a restaurant and you're like a hostess or a manager, because Capricorn is very much a manager. But then your 10th house is Taurus, right? So speaking of Leo rising, so if your 10th house is in Taurus, it means that the career and the work that you would aspire to do would be a lot more creative. and maybe money driven, right? Like you can be a financial manager or something like that. So if you're not active in the workforce, or if you're not interested in working, or you don't live a life where you have to work, 10th house can also represent your role in the world, right? It can represent your passion projects. Maybe you go volunteer every Saturday and you are the lead volunteer, so you're running that organization. So your 10th house will also represent that. 10th house represents your bosses. That's where things start to get really interesting, because we tend to look at the chart at first and think that every single planet is about us, while planets that rule your 10th or sit in your 10th can very much also be about your bosses or people you deal with, authority figures in your life. 10th house also describes your strengths professionally, weaknesses professionally, opportunities that you may run into, and the periods of good luck and the periods of difficulty can be very much seen through the 10th house. Like if you have Saturn transiting your 10th, it's likely the period where you might be doing a lot of work and not seeing immediate rewards, versus when Jupiter is in the 10th house, it might be the time to try new things and be ready for the rewards to come, right? So very interesting. Definitely let me know what's happening in your 10th house. I find this topic quite fascinating. Career is one of the big things. People come to me as an astrologer. And if you have questions after watching this video, do not hesitate to book a reading and ask me to look at your 10th house in person. It's especially complicated when you have multiple planets in the 10th house, right? Because they can all speak either in unison or create a bit of a chaos and say a lot of different things depending on what they are. So let's take a look at the planets. I'm going to do the traditional planets and Chiron. I do not work with Lilith, and I don't really work so much with asteroids. So these are the ones I'm looking at. And let's talk. So if you have the sun in the 10th house, the sun is where we crave attention, right? So with the sun in the 10th house, you will seek to shine professionally, and you will seek to be recognized, at least through acknowledgement of how well you're doing, right? A lot of times the sun likes to be looked at. So a lot of times people with the sun in the 10th house take on a job of an icon of some sorts. They're great as a leader. They can be a celebrity, like an influencer. They can be a symbol. A lot of times you can see people being like a fitness instructor, especially if you have like Mars in your 10th house, even more so. Like fitness instructor, because like you would want a job where people look at you, right? Like where you are the sun. You may be like a fitness instructor in the center of the room and you move and people just follow you with their eyes. Or you can be a very creative person as well with this placement. Career is extra important to you with the sun in the 10th house, because the sun represents identity. The sun is your consciousness and your goals in life. So having the sun in the 10th means that developing a meaningful career is crucial to your personal development. Sometimes success gets delayed, right? You have to go through some challenges, you have to overcome some difficulty, but you do have the strong will to succeed. And having a career in which you guide people, you warm and nurture them, is quite likely here. So, you would like to be a boss, of course, you would like to be a star. If your sun is in Aquarius or in Libra, it might be a bit more difficult for you to be a star, to like assert yourself as the leader, because the sun in Libra and in Aquarius is a more complicated position. I highly recommend my sunlight in a jar candle if you'd like to strengthen your sun for these placements. But in general, even with these placements, you would still want to be visible and recognized, but you're not going to be as direct about it as an Aries or a Leo might be, for example. So if you have this placement, looking forward to hearing from you down below. Add something, that would be great. If you have the moon in the 10th house, so the moon in the 10th house Moon represents your needs. So here you need to have a successful career. You also need to nurture people through your job, right? Like the moon is very motherly. It's very protective and caring. So people with the moon in the 10th house, they oftentimes, without even trying, find themselves in positions of like, if they're a boss, they will be like a very nurturing boss that other people will come to. Very, very like kind and caring relationships with colleagues. The moon also represents where we get tied in emotionally. So the moon in the 10th could be a sign that you are very emotionally attached to what's happening at your job, right? Like some people can leave their work behind. You're likely going to take it home with you. Your colleagues and bosses can be like family to you, because once again, the moon is intimate, personal, and 10th house is work. So you form really deep, personal, familial like relationships with people you work with. Great for people working in real estate. You can see people being chefs with this placement, because that's one of the ultimate ways to nurture people. Yeah, real estate, cooking, or any other job where you're working with women or you're nurturing women. Like women can be very, very important for you professionally. You may also be quite successful in sales or working with the public, because the moon naturally is quite intuitive. And you got to look at the sign of the moon. That's why I highly recommend getting a reading, but better, like really good results for those with the moon in Cancer and Taurus. More complicated if your moon is in Capricorn or Scorpio, because that is the moon in its fall and detriment. You will still see the same energies, but when the moon is in a more compromised position, it tends to bring complications with it, right? Like, it doesn't mean you can't handle them, but there might be a bit more difficult energy. You can check out my Moonlit Trinity Moon in Cancer candles to help smooth that energy over. If you have Mercury in the 10th house, so Mercury is the planet of the mind. It's very quick and it's very intelligent, and it's really great for sales. Like, you could be a perfect salesperson. Your career is likely to be fast-paced. Maybe you're dealing with a lot of people, negotiating, chatting, kind of talking to lots and lots of people. Career in writing, doing some kind of writing, negotiating, public speaking for a living is likely. Career that is very technical. You need a job here, like you must have a job that will keep your mind stimulated. You're not going to enjoy like a very physical labor type work unless it's like a fitness trainer where you get to design different programs and you sort of get to deal with different people. You need that challenge, right? But could be a very technical career like programming, writing, sales, anything that's intellectually stimulating. You might have a job that requires more travel, even if that means you're like moving from one place in your town to another place, because that's what Mercury does. And like some other options, like being a cab driver, for example, can be seen here. Being a salesperson, being a TV newscaster, anywhere where you get to shine show off your mind is great. And especially strong results for those with Mercury in Gemini and Virgo. A bit more complicated if your Mercury is in Pisces or Sagittarius or it's retrograde. I do have Mercury in Gemini and Mercury in Virgo candles, so if you'd like to add some positive vibes to your professional house, check them out. And let me know how this resonates in the comments below. If you have Venus in the 10th house, Venus likes to enjoy things she's doing. So here the emphasis will be very strong on doing work that is fulfilling and satisfying, right? So you really need to take pleasure in whatever you're doing. And Venus here can be very much a sign of working in art, being a creative person, right? Being in beauty industry, being a dancer. So I guess that's like very creative. Or sometimes it can also be a sign that you're maybe more of like a salesperson or a business owner. You can also be working with finance, because Venus can also, having Venus here, it could be a good sign for managing money or dealing with money. A lot of times you may also benefit through working in partnership. And Venus tends to represent sometimes people we find attractive. So with Venus in the 10th house, you can also, you're more likely to be drawn to people that are professionally oriented, that are highly ambitious, right? Yeah, so yeah, like definitely, definitely like being a creative person, but also dealing with art, I can see here. So you can be a painter, or you can be somebody who sells paintings, right? Or someone who works at the museum. Being like a beauty person, or being somebody who makes beauty products, I can see here. And the same with like making jewelry and selling jewelry. But in general, quite lovely placement, especially if your Venus is in Libra, Pisces, Taurus. If you have Venus in Aries, Virgo, and Scorpio, check out my Venus in Libra Moonlit Trinity, because Moonlit Trinity highlights Venus and Taurus candles and oils to help boost your Venus, because those are the signs where Venus can be a bit more subdued due to the nature of the sign. If you have Mars in the 10th house, Mars is, wherever Mars is placed, is where we're willing to take on a fight. So Mars in the 10th could mean you fight for a living, right? You are an athlete, you are boxer or a martial artist, right? Like Mars in the 10th, very much a soldier, someone in military, if you have Mars in the 10th. A business owner is highly likely, right? Because you need to take action, you need to show courage, an initiative in the career. And so like having a very like entrepreneurial spirit is likely here. Being very ambitious is likely here. Especially if your Mars is Aries, Scorpio, or Capricorn, really 3 very powerful Mars placements. If it's Libra, Taurus, or Cancer, you're still likely to exhibit those qualities, but they're not necessarily going to be as obvious as with the previous 3 that I mentioned. You may show up as more masculine at your job, even if you identify as a woman. Maybe at times like a little bit intimidating for other people, right? You might prefer to work alone and sort of feel like you can get more done when you work by yourself. And besides like just being really active and having a business, this could also be a place where you find more conflict. Career or like work, house, professional matters bring more conflict. So maybe you're a lawyer, or maybe you're just somebody who somehow, whether by your own volition or accidentally, ends up fighting with colleagues more. So that's why a lot of times, in order to avoid those battles with bosses, it's better for you to be your own boss, right? Hence, basically, it's better for you to work for yourself. Let me know how this resonates down below. If you have Jupiter in the 10th house, Jupiter is lucky, right? Especially if it's Jupiter in Pisces, Sagittarius, or Cancer. Check out my Jupiter in Pisces candles. Well, I'm actually sold out of candles. Check out the oils if you have Jupiter in a less strong position of Virgo, Gemini, or Capricorn, because they can boost your confidence and optimism. But in general, Jupiter is a guide. Jupiter is a guru, is a teacher. So having that archetype, that planet in your 10th house will bring you good luck when it comes to supporting other people, guiding other people. You can make a powerful motivational speaker. And you can also just in general be quite lucky professionally, where maybe your friend helps you find a job, right? Or you just walk past an audition and you get in and you get the job, right? There might be like kind of lucky breaks. You're also someone who is your public image is, unless there's other planets, right, or aspects, just taking Jupiter alone, your public image will be of someone cheerful and generous and optimistic and sort of outgoing, right? So it could be quite positive. Sometimes Jupiter can be like so lucky that you can't like you can't get rid of the Jupiterian bounty. There's a story I read about the professional football player whose mother left him a chain of beauty parlors, and he couldn't sell them because they were making too much money, but it kind of affected his public image. So too much luck that maybe is destructive to other parts of your life, but it's still beneficial for some other parts. So great for teaching, like I said, great for being a judge, for example, life coach, a guide, sometimes lovely for working in finance or having a job that deals with travel and education. And let me know how this resonates down below. If you have Saturn in the 10th house, we love Saturn. Saturn is the planet of hard work. So you're someone who's very hardworking, very dedicated and patient professionally. You are likely to be very meticulous in your approach to the job. And as you go through your life and you climb the ladder, becoming a manager becomes more likely. Saturn really is not just a soldier, right? Like Saturn wants to be at the top overseeing things. He's like too serious to just chill around. If he dedicates time into work, it's going to want to keep climbing. So being a manager, being like a producer, boss, somebody's in charge, someone who's like structuring and organizing things is likely. Really good for business, especially because it gives you the patience to work with ups and downs, which are a part of most businesses. There might, of course, be some delays with Saturn in the 10th house, and perhaps it takes you longer to figure out the direction you want to go in. And as well, there might be some heaviness and some sort of self-imposed restrictions or self-imposed worries where you really want to achieve and you are extra hard on yourself. So just beware of that and know that Saturn is always a sign of things improving with time. So if your career seems confusing right now and you're young, if you're like under 30, that makes perfect sense because Saturn becomes more of an ally after your Saturn return and even more so in your mid-30s. But can be a sign of being quite successful later in life. Let me know how this resonates down below. If you have Uranus in the 10th house, Uranus is a sign of a revolutionary professionally, right? It can be a sign that you are a pioneer. You are starting a company that sells pajamas for dogs. I'm sure that's a thing already, but maybe you're the person who started it. Anything that's like unusual, new, shocking is the job for you, right? Like Uranus could be somebody who works with technology, maybe developing meta or developing AI. It could also be somebody who maybe works in the drug industry or does things that are like a little bit unorthodox, right? There might be more ups and downs professionally because Uranus just by nature is not very stable. So you may go through sudden ups and downs in your professional life, maybe career changes, maybe changes. As soon as things get boring and predictable, you might be out. So you need work that is authentic, that is exciting, that is unconventional, that keeps stimulating your mind. And the more opportunities to try to kind of grow and change and explore it offers, the better. As Uranus also describes your 10th house, that could also be your boss. You can be working with someone who's quite eccentric and different and unique, weird. So, and working in solitude, working on your own could be something that you enjoy a lot more versus being micromanaged. Uranus would not stand for someone having like a tight grip or standing behind their shoulder. If you have Neptune in the 10th house, Neptune is interesting, right? Because Neptune is spiritual. It's also creative. It's also delusional at times. So these might be all attributes of your job or attributes of your boss at one time or another. So in terms of creativity, you do see Neptune in a lot of Hollywood producers or Hollywood actors and like Hollywood people's charts, right? So working in the entertainment industry, working under a pseudonym, having success under a different name. Maybe you're a writer, and like having Neptune in the 12th house could be a sign of like having a bit of deception in your career where you don't show your name, right? You don't like, you're not just exposing your true name, you have an alter ego. Very, yeah, like I said, very imaginative, very creative, could also be a sign of altruistic tendencies and having a job that helps other people. My boyfriend has Neptune in the 10th house, and he used to work with an adult group homes. So he was taking care of adults with developmental issues and different disabilities. So Neptune in the 10th house would always want to guide and help and heal people, help people who are poor, sick, unfortunate, or struggling. Sometimes people in mental asylums, orphanages, etc. So it's like a very, very caring placement. Neptune also represents the sea, so you might also be drawn to work with marine life or work in the ocean, or just spend more time. Maybe you're just spending more time professionally by the water. Let me know how this resonates in the comments below. If you have Pluto in the 10th house, so Pluto is interesting. Pluto is about power, right? So you crave power with this placement, but you're not likely to admit it. You're likely to be more power behind the throne type of person. So there is like a lot of drive, a lot of desire for success, and maybe even obsession with being successful, but like very much behind the scenes type work. Like you can be like the vice president or somebody in the government who is not well known, but actually has opinion that sways the opinions of everybody else in the government, right? Doing work that deals with death is a possibility here. So someone who's like a mortician, or somebody who deals with owning a funeral home, right? You can make a great therapist. Another example of power behind the throne, right? You sort of a puppet master. Not necessarily, that's not what therapists do, but they do have this power to change people, right? To change lives of people. So being a therapist, being a doctor, being an actor is possible here, because Pluto will give you depth that you can then express through your roles, right? Versus maybe you don't let the emotions shine in the everyday life because you have a tight grip on your feelings. But if you are an actor, you'll get to express them. You may sort of have this like desire to be seen, but feel uncomfortable when you're seen. And as in Pluto representing death and rebirth, you might also be going through professional transformations more often than other people, or at least every decade, perhaps. And Pluto represents bosses, so you might also work with somebody who is this shadowy figure, power behind the throne type of person. Let me know how this resonates down below. Last but not least, if you have Chiron in your 10th house, Chiron is the wounded healer, right? It's a placement that represents our biggest strength, but it also represents our biggest weakness and vulnerability. So with Chiron in the 10th, your reputation, your career, your status can be wounded somehow, right? And that doesn't mean that you did something shadowy, but that could mean that maybe you are a person that is known as a vulnerable person. Like somebody who's known for what they've been through. Like if you've dealt with pain and struggles, like the outside world is likely to know that about you. Professionally, you might be going through a bit more challenges, right? Maybe it takes you longer to figure out who you are or what you want to do. You might, for a while, have a sense that other people are getting ahead before you, or getting ahead due to you helping them, but you're not getting ahead. There might also be some kind of professional wound connected to childhood, right? Because 10th house is opposite the 4th, so they're always connected. So maybe you felt rejected as a child and you're trying to prove extra hard that you're worthy of love, you're worthy of success. And your wounds can become more visible. Like I said, you may be known for your wound, or your wounds can be more visible. I have a client with this placement, and she's a mother of a child with autism. So her struggles, her everyday struggles, is part of what she's known for and what she represents, right? And that's where the strength of the Chiron comes in. So yes, you might be dealing with more wounding, or you might be struggling professionally a little bit, but you also have a giant amounts and reserves of compassion and love and care. And so doing work that is building other people up, right? And finding success not in the bank account numbers and not in the titles. Of course, you know, money doesn't hurt, and you need a certain amount of money to live comfortably. But as long as you make enough, to be comfortable, right? Trying to find success and recognition and joy, find them in the work well done instead of in the approval of other people, or, like I said, the amount of money you have in your bank account. So you can be really great at like guiding people who go through professional change, maybe guiding people who just got fired, helping them find work. So taking on that wound and becoming a symbol for people in a transitional stage or in a wounded place can be also very rewarding for you. So this is it about the 10th house. I hope you liked this video and you resonated. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do. And I'll talk to you soon. Bye.